Hi, and welcome to the Music Share Young Artist program series, ViewPoint. Today, I have the honor and pleasure to talk with David Kim, who is the concertmaster of the Philadelphia Orchestra since 1999. David started playing the violin at the age of 3 and began studies with the famed pedagogue Dorothy DeLay at the age of 8. That's a long time, David. He later received his bachelor's and master's degrees from the Juilliard School. Highlights from his 2019-20 season include appearing as soloist with the Philadelphia Orchestra, teaching performance residencies and master classes at the University of Texas at Austin, the Manhattan School of Music. Bob, it goes on and on and on and on and on because he's done so much. Oh, he also has been awarded honorary doctorates from the Eastern University in suburban Philly and the University of Rhode Island and Dickinson College. Those are important things as well. His instruments, and this is where we really get into it. His instruments are a J.B. Guadagnini from Milan, and it was from 1757, and it's on loan from the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the Michelangelo Bergonzi from Cremona, 1754. So he's got those two beautiful instruments. And so with that, welcome, David Kim.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. I just have to interrupt you right away and tell you a story. When I first went to Aspen, I was 10 years old, and so that was about 1973 with my mom. And of course, my mom was a musician, and we went to everything that was offered in terms of performances, master classes. We went to everything. But one performance, totally, I still remember it, and we talked about it until the day she died. And that was you playing Sibelius Concerto in 1973 with piano. And it was just something I'll never forget.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's
I am so honored to hear that. Thank you.
oh no, I still remember to this day. And so, I'm just always admire your playing and artistry and what you're doing now. So this is a great honor for me. So thank you so much for inviting me.
No, it's our pleasure. So with that, let me ask you a question. When did you decide that you wanted to be an orchestral musician? Did you want to be a concertmaster?
Well, like many young people throughout different generations, and it happens all the time to this day. I ask young people, I'm like, what are you thinking of doing? Where would you like to be in 5 years or 10 years? And so many of them say, well, I'd like to be a soloist. And so, of course, if you're in that whole Juilliard, Curtis, Dorothy DeLay kind of world, it's something that you think about, you dream about, and desire so much. And in some cases, I have to be honest that many people said, "Oh, yeah, it's kind of a given. You're going to get there." And when I was a child, and prodigy was a word that was thrown about. But you know, when I got through my 20s, I was so naive. I didn't see the writing on the wall. I didn't understand that the less and less that I played in terms of number of solo concerts, the invitations received, travel, calls from important conductors, or that was not really happening, but I was so naive. I just thought, oh, that's going to happen any day. But finally, when I had an epiphany, I think I was like 31 or 32 years old, way too late. And that it was then that I decided, okay, you gotta you gotta get a job, you gotta earn a paycheck, you have to support your wife. We didn't have kids yet, and that was the beginning of an absolute about face. It happened literally overnight. I literally went at that time. We were living north of New York City. I took Metro North down into the city to a place called Tower Records. It was a place where you could go and buy CDs, and I bought like $1,000 worth of all the standard repertoire, and I just started listening. Before I did anything, I just started listening to Brahms 4 and La Mer and Ein Heldenleben, and Don Juan, and I could go on and on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm sure you get asked this question a lot, but is there are there steps that one needs to do to prepare an audition for an orchestral situation? Are there things that are important to understand, shall I say, about that preparation?
Well, I think without question, at least I'm sure there are many different ways to approach trying to win an orchestral position. But at least my approach, which I undertook at that time when I was about 31, 32, uh, and it seems to be kind of the pattern that basically everybody has to do. And that is, first of all, you just have to really spend the hours learning the orchestral. You can't just say, oh, I'm just going to kind of know the stuff and get to know them, and then I can go into the audition and handle these things. You have to kind of, there's a certain something through that big screen, that curtain. We can sense when we're listening from the other side if somebody is just green or they've never played this particular work in an orchestra on stage with kind of a serious orchestra. There's something that comes through the screen if they're supposed to be playing something with the horn section, but they have no idea. They're kind of playing this kind of gypsy rhythm. And so one of the things is you really have to spend the sacrificial hours learning all that stuff. So it feels like, even if it's not necessarily stuff that you've been playing your whole life, you can fool them. The other thing is you must get good coaching. It's something that I right away started with Anshel Brusiloff, who was one of the great concertmasters of all time of the Philadelphia Orchestra in the 60s and 70s. Glenn Dicterow at that time, the legendary concertmaster of the New York Philharmonic. I just went to a lot of people. Roberto Diaz, who was the principal viola of the Philadelphia Orchestra at that time, now president of Curtis Institute of Music. I just went to not everybody that I could possibly find and play and kind of get confused, but really go to a few people that I really valued their opinion.
Were there, I'm sorry, were there elements? You mentioned rhythm. Would you say that rhythm having a context, or what about pitch? How does...
Well, all of those things, a lot of times young people don't know exactly what the expectations are. And so they ask me questions like, well, what kind of pitch or rhythm are you looking for? And really, the simple answer is, we're just looking for the basic, solid, good playing. Play in tune, play with good rhythm. It doesn't have to be anything out of the ordinary, really. We're just looking for a beautiful sound. Those basically 3 or 4 things: sound, rhythm, intonation has to be solid, not too sharp, not too flat. Musicality has to be kind of just very easy to embrace, uncomplicated. All these things, basically, you have to imagine, do I want to sit with that person for the next 30 years? And if the answer is yes, mission accomplished. It's pretty simple. There's no
great.
secret formula.
That's great. So to get to this point, did you study from books or of orchestral excerpts? There are lots of, I know, even me who never really set foot in an orchestra, I looked at, there were 3 books that I looked at of orchestral excerpts when I was young. Did you do that?
Well, they're published by International, probably, maybe. They're by Gingold. He accumulated
Exactly.
incredible, yeah. But I kind of right off the bat realized that I needed help. I couldn't just depend on Mr. Gingold to give me bowings and fingerings. I wanted kind of a broad kind of palette and be able to go through and kind of figure out, okay, it seems like this fingering in this run in Don Juan is one that kind of is dependable under pressure. And so I started calling in favors, and I asked a lot of people who were already in orchestras, hey, is there any way that you could send me a copy of your Don Juan? Or is there any way that you could scan or send me, something like that, a PDF of something? And then once I had a kind of a good library, I had a good stack, then I contacted Calmus and I started ordering brand new parts. You can just order one violin part. And then I made my own edition. I would take all the bowings that I considered and the ones that I liked best and the ones that seemed kind of more median, kind of typical bowings and fingerings. I didn't want to go too far off the beaten track. Then I made them, put them into my own part, and then bound them into a beautiful 3-ring binder and marked them with colored labels and everything. So I wanted to be really ready for anything, so that it's really nice when you take an orchestral audition, you can take your own parts in there. It's like cheating on a test. It's an amazing asset. So I had my own fingerings, my own bowings. I had my own, this is going to psych me up if I put this one word at the beginning. This is going to keep me from rushing if I put this one word here or one phrase. And I would put some colored markings in, not overdoing it, but those things helped me to succeed eventually, even though it took me a little while to kind of sift through everything and realize, this doesn't really work. Better switch to this, that kind of thing.
Wow. So I'm curious, this may be a silly question, but do you use your book when you play in the orchestra with your stand partner?
Well, no, because now I've been in the orchestra for 21 years and we've gone through, of course, all of the standard, especially the concertmaster solos. I'm a real writer. It's kind of a sin in some orchestras. You don't want to write because people are rotating their seating and switching stand partners, and sometimes it's like really bad orchestral etiquette. But I'm fortunate because I'm always sitting on the first stand, my own part, year after year, now decade after decade. And so I have the same part that I see every time. Say I haven't played Missa Solemnis by Beethoven in 13 years, but at least I'll have a starting point, and we're playing it this coming season. And I'll look at it, and of course I'll make changes. I play a little differently. Maybe I use my fourth finger just a little bit more now than I used to. The little changes like that. Excuse me for one thing. My dog is scratching at the door. I have to let her in. Okay, come on in. Come on in. Okay. There she goes. Okay. So, and then my stand partners realize that that's what I need to do, and they are so kind. Nobody ever erases even one comma or dot or anything. They know if my initials are in the top right-hand corner, they leave all the markings, and I, of course, try not to overdo it and write too much in, but it sure saves a lot of time the next time we come around. If sometimes I don't even remember having played it, I'll say, whoa, look at this. We played this piece by Defia or something, and those are my markings. Oh, how helpful.
Wow. So when you come back to that marking, do you change things? Do you, look at it and go, how could I have done this one? Why does that
A
happen?
little bit. And many conductors are very, even though they're not violinists, they're so well versed in violin technique and string crossings and colors and positions and slides, and it's amazing. And many times, like my music director, Yannick Nézet again, he will ask me for stuff all the time. He won't even ask. He'll just look over and he'll say, that's sharp. Or he'll look over and he'll say, no, like this, like, oh, let's go up on the D string. And I'm always amazed. It's just, these guys, they're paid well for a reason.
That's
And
really
so
cool.
I'll change markings. And if I don't like it, I'll put, this is my little secret, many of us, I'll put the initials of the conductor next to the marking. Kind of, that's a signal that I don't like the change. So meaning I'll erase it perhaps after their week is finished, and I'll go back to my old thing. At least that'll be my baseline.
Wow, that's incredible. So, okay, let's move back to these auditions for a second.
Yeah.
With auditions, we are required, or the auditioner is required to do a concerto. Do you have a list of concertos that you think are appropriate for this kind of an audition, or not appropriate?
Yes, I do. That's a terrific question, Bill, because um, it's a question that I get so often. And what I have seen kind of evolve in the orchestral world, at least in Philadelphia, but it seems to be happening a little bit in other orchestras as well. They don't just, usually it's one romantic concerto, complete, and then usually Mozart concerto, maybe first movement. But we used to make it any Mozart concerto, and then somebody would play Mozart G major, number three, and you just got that little bit of feeling like, okay, it's a little easier than D major or A major, so like they don't get a strike against them, but it's just a little like, I wonder why they chose that one. And then same with romantic concertos. We don't leave it completely open anymore because what if somebody comes maybe with Bruch concerto? Or even maybe Mendelssohn could be considered slightly less hefty. So usually we give a list that includes Bartok, B minor, Tchaikovsky, Brahms, Sibelius, and those are the three, of course, that are played the most. And then Barber comes up quite often, Glasnow, sometimes Dvorak, but it's very dangerous for the going up to the high notes in the early part. But from my experience, Bill, what I have found is that the really great players, the ones that you look on their resume later and you're like, holy cow, I never could have beaten this person. They have major wins and all these, they're like, they won Queen Elizabeth and they won this and they won that. They can play any concerto. But people who are perhaps more like us, like mortals like us,
Yeah.
I find that Brahms concerto can be problematic. The first page is just somehow a little dangerous, a little bit. If you're not completely warmed up, comfortable, relaxed, it can be a little bit scratchy. It can be not quite. You get 10 minutes with the house pianist. It can be a little bit difficult to match up. The quintuplets and the sextuplets. So I find Mendelssohn, Brahms just a little dangerous. I find Sibelius very good, but it's kind of like Bach. Like that first paragraph people can be on the committee, can be quite dogmatic and quite opinionated about the way they think it should go. One person may think, oh, this should be ice cold and Nordic, and the next person's like, oh no, this is like fire. And yeah, so it can perhaps be a little bit controversial.
Hmm.
And then I think what works really well is Tchaikovsky. Tchaikovsky, you can just kind of come out. You don't have to really reinvent the wheel. You just come out, you nail it. And nobody really can win an audition with their concerti, but they certainly can lose it, I think. If they come out and really fall in their face with their concerto, I think it really puts hesitation in our minds before we even start the excerpts. But if they play really a solid, let's say, first two pages of Sibelius, then I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at myself in the mirror like, okay, could we hear some excerpts, please? And I'm already like, okay, listening a little differently. Like, okay, this person is superb violinist, super solid, cool as a cucumber. They nailed first two pages of Sibelius. Now, let's see if they understand orchestral culture.
Wow. That's really fascinating. So, okay, I have another perhaps silly question.
Nothing is silly.
To prepare for all of what you do, do you still play scales? You're one
I'm
of
really embarrassed to say I don't. I'm not a big scale person. I only play A major scale, and in the same rhythms that Miss DeLay gave me from my childhood. I started, as you mentioned earlier, when I was 8 years old, and so we spent the first 3 or 4 years just building technique. I mean, I kind of learned a lot of repertoire, but just to check it off. But I spent so much of my time doing scales and Yost and Sevchik and Kreutzer and Don't and Sit and all that stuff. It's kind of something that I just cringe when I even think about it. But I'm certainly eager to encourage other young people to incorporate those things in their daily practice, at least at some point in their life. I don't believe that any of us are really capable of this kind of sacrificial technique practice and then unaccompanied Bach and then, learn a concerto and then do your chamber music, like this kind of 5-6 hours a day for their whole lives. I mean, I feel like there are times in their life, like maybe they fall in love and they're, oh my gosh, I really haven't done enough practicing because I've been in Central Park rowing on the boat with my new boyfriend. Like there's times things change in our lives, or maybe you had a little shoulder problem and so you had to kind of ease off for a year or 6 months or something. So my feeling is you do have to spend at some portion of your life, you do have to do that kind of hard technical work with all those etudes and method books that I mentioned. But at my stage, I'm 57 now, I find that as long as I'm practicing something that's difficult, it gives me plenty of technique work, and it's kind of a good combination of violin push-ups, sit-ups, and dental flossing. So for instance, during this whole COVID, I've been pretty good about practicing, and this is saying something because I really dislike practicing, but every day I practice the Beethoven Violin Concerto cover to cover. Basically, I play through, and if I need to practice stuff, I do. And then also from the thirds to the end of the Carmen Fantasy, kind of under tempo, really in tune, kind of nailing it. And every day I do that, and I feel like that helps me with scales, arpeggios, thirds. It's kind of like going through Carl Flesch, but you're doing it with music. And even when the orchestra is playing normally, if I'm very busy, but I have a concerto coming up, even while I'm playing in the orchestra, I will kind of almost mentally practice while I'm playing Brahms' Second Symphony. Like I won't just sit there and just play the Brahms Second Symphony as a member of the first violin section. I will play with intensity and try to vibrate every note, or I will try to make sure that I don't reach up there, that I get around, like I'm thinking violinistically. And I find that those things help me to be in good shape at all times, whether I'm not so busy like right now, or when I'm super busy like before COVID.
That's really, really, really interesting. So that this idea of like doing concerto scales, of pulling or extracting from the repertoire that you're doing, be it concertos, be it orchestral, be it quartets or whatever, but pulling from that and finding those passages that you can treat in the same way that you treated the scales, or you can refresh yourself or your feeling in the same way. I'm really fascinated by that. That's really, really cool.
Well, but then there was also a time when I was like in my 20s when I was going to a lot of international competitions. And as everybody knows, in the first round, usually they ask for 2 Paganini caprices and Bach. And so at that time, whether I was preparing for a competition or not, for me, I was not doing Sit and Yost and Gaviniers and all that. Every day, I would practice Paganini caprices, 17, 24, and Bach A minor unaccompanied sonata, especially the fugue. And when I finished practicing those, some days it would take me 45 minutes, some days it would take me half an hour. But as long as I felt that kind of fatigue in my left hand, I felt satisfied, like, okay, I did my violin push-ups, sit-ups, and dental flossing today.
Mm-hmm. But you didn't overdo. So it was like you were really aware of what it felt like in your hands. You were responding, reacting to that, I guess.
Right. Right. And some days I might practice those particular works. And I might do this the same with Beethoven Violin Concerto nowadays or Carmen Fantasy. I might also do super slow practicing and trying to absolutely kind of do slow motion practicing where I feel myself ascending to the higher positions, making sure that my pinky doesn't curl, which it tends to do, making sure that my bow stays straight, which I'm more prone to the windshield wiper method. So all these bad habits, which never go away, they're always kind of close by. I'm always trying to monitor them, whether it's practicing super slow, slow motion, in tempo. If I'm a little short on time, just a run through, maybe set up my phone, just a little bit of making sure that my intonation is not creeping up. Listening is always a great thing. I hate doing it, but so helpful.
I'm curious, what app do you use to check if your intonation is going up or down? Do you use a particular app?
My ear.
They're the
No, I
best app in the
don't, and
world.
I don't use a tuner. Well, yeah, and I find that it's not so much that I find myself everything is in general like 20% too high or 10% sharp or even 2%, but I start to hear certain notes kind of project their head up, like "Ugh," they come up and then like it's like whack-a-mole, like the head comes up and like a note is high, or I'll shift up. And I think a lot of us are guilty of that kind of, it makes the violin kind of spin a little bit when we play sharp. We like that kind of zing in the sound, but then we get kind of stuck in that kind of slightly sharp-ish sound world, and then you're in trouble because then, especially for me, if I'm on stage and Yannick looks over at me and says, "Sharp, it's sharp." I mean, I have to be able to. It could be in the middle of a recording session for Deutsche Grammophon. He might look over and say, and so I have to be able to absolutely change on the spot. And so I'm constantly guarding against that. And so for the first half of COVID, I tuned to like 436. I was just trying very hard to recondition my ear because my ear has a tendency to go up. But you never know. Everybody's different.
Do you tune in the orchestra to 440, 441,
440. Our official A is 440, but that's uh, best effort. I can hear it around. I can hear myself sometimes. The oboist, I'll look at the oboist, smile, and they'll give the A, and then I hear like, yeah, I can hear A's around me, so already creeping up. I can hear myself creeping up. So what I do to combat against that is before I walk on stage, I make sure that I'm tuned to 440. And then when I walk on stage, no matter what A the oboist gives me, it might be, I mean, a millimeter off, it might be this much, I will pretend to adjust, but I won't adjust. I keep it at 440 no matter what. Because the tuning period before the conductor walks out is very short. So if all of a sudden, and my peg slip, I'm dead. So I want to keep it at 440. So I come out and I pretend like I'm tuning and adjusting, but I'm not touching anything.
That's wild. Huh. Huh. So, okay. Could I ask you, who studied with Miss DeLay from such an early age, what was it like when you were young studying with her? How was she with you?
She was like my favorite grandmother or my favorite aunt or my favorite school teacher. She was so just enchantingly kind and warm. And um, she and my mother team taught me basically. I started with Miss DeLay. We lived near Pittsburgh, so once a month, my parents would drive me across to Sarah Lawrence College, where Miss DeLay taught on Sundays, and I would take a 2-hour lesson once a month. And then when I was 10, we moved to South Carolina, and from there I would fly every other week and take a 1-hour lesson. But my mother would confer with Miss DeLay and take copious notes. And my mother was the opposite of Miss DeLay, super intense, yelling, screaming. It was hell on earth. And so it was so nice to go to Miss DeLay and have her call me sugar plum and sweetie pie and give me the like, oh, where did that come from? That beautiful trill that you just did, and like all that stuff. So I think part of her magic was that we all just wanted that praise, we wanted that encouragement, and just like affirmation and just the love. We all adored her because we all had neurotic, pushy, crazy parents in the background, neurotically hoping that our kid would be the next Shlomo Mintz.
When you got older, did that change, or did it pretty much stay that way with the scarf and the glasses? And I don't know. Did she?
Pretty much.
Huh, huh.
Pretty
So
much. I would say,
no, go ahead.
I would say that she was uh, absolutely the same in terms of that warmth and kindness and accessibility and all that. But um, she was amazing. She knew how to teach an 8-year-old kid. And then she also knew how to teach me after I had finished bachelor's degree, master's degree, and I would just come back to her once every 4 months for a little tune-up session or a little boost. And she could talk to me at that point, and she just knew how to speak to us without speaking down to us, never condescending, never, well, she was the best. And but I think we were a little competitive, all of us. We all wanted
No.
whatever it was that Miss DeLay had to offer.
Yeah, I remember from my time with her, I remember that whenever she was happy with what I was doing, it was always, oh, sweetie, oh, sugar plum, oh, Billy. And whenever she was not happy, it was William. So,
I remember I was like thinking to myself at that time, like, she calls him Billy. Why doesn't she call me Davy or something? I remember her calling you Billy.
that's really great.
Yeah.
So, I
We were
was,
so fortunate. We were so fortunate.
oh God, yes. I so thank you for sharing and giving us a little more insight into what goes on when one is a concert master of a great orchestra like the Philadelphia Orchestra, and the kinds of things that one goes through to maintain one's discipline, or goes through to even get to that place. It's been really a wonderful thing to hear your journey. I'm so happy to have participated in that.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you. It's a great honor to be here and speak with you. And thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you.